All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the first couple sections here in Chapter 5. So, in the first section here, we're going to talk about species interaction, basic relationships. You covered it in bio, so we're going to go through it pretty quick. So, all species interact with each other, and they form different types of relationships depending on the situation. And so, they're illustrated here a little bit. Pests, consumption. This is a plant that lives on the side of a tree, for instance. And so, naturally, within ecosystems, there's competition. There's only so much food, there's only so much water, so much space, and so much habitat for organisms to exist. And so, organisms need to compete for these limited resources. And so, if they compete, typically this principle falls forward, the competitive exclusion principle. And this is an important principle that you guys need to understand and have in the back of your head. So no two species can occupy the exact same niche for very long. That's it in a nutshell, which basically means that if one species is utilizing a resource, the other species is utilizing the same resource, eventually one's going to lose out in that competition for that resource and will become extinct. And so this competition for these resources can be one of two different kinds: intra-specific or inter-specific, and intra-specific. These are the two flavors. So interspecific is when the competition between members of two different species. So if you look in this picture, there's different species that are both trying to occupy the same space, eat the same resource, which is the grassland. You got wildebeests and zebras in the picture. The result is that neither species can obtain as many resources as they could potentially as a result. Intraspecies competition is people of the same species. So these two elk are fighting each other for a mate, for instance. This includes, so you have these two different forms of competition within a species, which promotes evolution, typically, of natural selection, because some genes will win out over others potentially, which we talked about the other day. This isn't always the best example, but it is one example. And then competition between species can result in one species losing out and becoming extinct over the other, which would be the competitive exclusion principle. Continuing on, so these relationships between these organisms can result in a variety of different relationships. One of those is predation. So predation, you guys well know, one predator feeds on another on prey. So one organism feeds on another organism. So predator-prey usually involves heightened senses of better eyesight and things like that to be able to attack and kill. There's different techniques. So there's camouflage involved here. There's great eyesight and agility involved here. And then this one, they trap their prey. So there's a lot of different variations in how predation can occur, but when one eats the other. And so how do prey handle this? Prey handle this through these basic ideas. So how do they escape it? They can camouflage themselves, blend in with their surroundings. They can have an outer protective shell like this turtle over here. They can use chemicals like stink bugs do, skunks do, spray away and scare off competition. They have warning colorations like reds and yellows to indicate that they might be poisonous or whatever. They can mimic. So this particular caterpillar looks like the head of a snake, and so they can look like a different creature. General deceptive looks, like this cat, it's not this big, it's billowing up, making itself look larger than it is. And then deceptive behavior. Act, scream, do different things that make you scare things away because they don't want to have to deal with it. This term right here is an interesting one, idea of coevolution. So this happens in predator-prey relationships. The predator needs to be good at hunting, so has good eyesight and things like that. The prey need to avoid that, so they need to be better camouflaged and better at all those other things we talked about. And so as a result, it can lead to coevolution. And so an example would be a rabbit and a hawk. A hawk has to have good eyesight in order to see rabbits and attack and get them so he can continue to live. The rabbit needs to be camouflaged and be agile so he can avoid it. And so as a result, the rabbits that are more agile live and the other ones die. And then the hawk, and so we have faster and faster rabbits, which means the hawk needs to have better and better eyesight and stronger talons so it can get it. And so you can see that one species makes the other one evolve, and the other one has to evolve to catch up, and it creates an improvement or an evolution by both of the individuals involved. The prey trying to avoid capture and the predator trying to do the capture or eat them up. So the levels of defense and counter defense will continue to escalate in what you could think of as an evolutionary arms race. That's what coevolution is in a nutshell. It's a cute way to say it, isn't it? Next is parasitism. Parasitism is when one creature just feeds on, not the whole creature. If it was feeding on the whole creature, that'd be predation. Just on part. Just a little part of it that it's eating and consuming on. And so then the two things involved here are parasites, and of course they're hosts, which you've probably been a host to a parasite or two in your day. Congratulations. Some of these parasites can live inside of people, like tapeworms and microorganisms. Some of these parasites can live on your outside, like maybe if you ever had a tick from being in the woods. I've had a couple in my day. Or maybe you've had some fleas. You've probably never had a sea lamprey. We'll talk about those later on. Those are kind of interesting little creatures. Mistletoe, that was the plant growing on the side of the tree earlier. So, and then some have very little contact with their hosts at all. The cowbird, one of my favorite little interactions that exist in parasitism. So what a cowbird does is it goes and lays its eggs in the nest of another bird, so it doesn't have to take care of them. And so what happens is the cowbird egg hatches along with the other eggs. Cowbirds grow faster and are bigger than the other fledglings in the nest, and so it pushes them all out of the nest, and the mama bird of all those little birds that got pushed out of the nest continues to feed that big one, make it stronger and better, and so it's living off the parental love of the other bird. So that's an interesting one. These are all pictures or examples of that. You'll see, if you look, these little leech things on these fish, on this fish right here, those are the sea lampreys. That's the cowbird. You see how much bigger it is than all these other little chicks in the nest? It's going to get you every time. And so actually there's the cowbird egg. You see that it's laid several eggs in the nest. And these are the other eggs that are just much smaller, and they're not going to be taken care of as well. There's a tick. There's your mistletoe growing on the top of that tree. And so there's another sea lamprey. So those are examples of your parasitism. Mutualism. Mutualism is a little more loving and caring. So this is two species that interact with each other, and they both benefit. There's perks to both. And so there's these birds right here that are on top of this rhino. Birds are eating ticks and fleas off the top of the rhino. And so the rhino's happy because it doesn't have parasites eating it, so it likes the cowbirds up there. And the cowbirds get a free meal, so they're happy. So mutualisms were both benefiting. Bees pollinate the plants, right? And the plants give up the honey, the nectar, I should say. So there's a good example. Here's another one with the sea anemone, and oh, there's Nemo. Oh, and all good examples of mutualism. Next is commensalism. Commensalism is where one benefits and one is hurt in the process. And so this happens. We're thinking less and less. We're thinking there's more and more parasitism in the world, and this actually doesn't usually happen very often. Usually the other creature is getting hurt or benefiting as a result of the other species. So we usually have mutualism, or we have parasitism more than we have commensalism. Commensalism is where one is benefiting and the other one is unaffected. So this plant growing off the side of this tree, that would be getting the benefit of being closer to the sunlight up in the sky, and it's not affecting the tree in the least. In reality, researchers are starting to see that potentially it's taking nutrients from the tree and things along that line, which wouldn't make it that way, but commensalism ideally would be where one benefits and one doesn't get hurt. Nests in trees are another example for birds. They don't really hurt the tree at all, but they benefit from being away from predators. Section 2. Section 2, we're talking about this idea of niches and the overlap of niches and how that affects things. So these are two different species, species 1, species 2. If species 1 and 2 share some part of their niche with one another, the competitive exclusion principle is going to have to come into effect. That can't be sustainable. And so as a result, the species need to be able to separate so they don't overlap the niche. If they can do that, they can both be successful. If not, one will become extinct as a result of it. So working to reduce niche overlap is the best way for both species to exist. And so one way that happens is through this process right here called resource partitioning. And so an example are these warblers, a variety of different type of warbler species that all hang out in the same pine trees. And so as a result, they've broken it up or partitioned out the resource of the tree itself and the pine nuts basically inside the tree for eating. And so one warbler will just live in this yellow zone here on the outside of the tree. This one will only hang out in this region of the tree. This one will only hang out in this part, or only at the bottom. So they won't, it looks like they're using the same niche, but in reality they've separated out and they're all using different components of it. And so one way to avoid the competitive exclusion principle where one will lose out is to partition up the resource and only use parts of it. That will allow you not to have competition. And when you do that, a lot of times it will lead to this idea, which is called evolutionary divergence, where creatures that were once of the same species or similar species start to become better adapted to certain things to avoid competition. They can use shared resources in different ways as a result of it. They can use it at different times of the day, and then that will avoid competition. They'll use different places, or they'll use them in different ways. And so as a result, they're not really competing with each other, but then over time, that's going to really lead to more and more divergence within the system. And so fruit seed eaters are examples. All of these have different beaks, which means they specialize in different, or they need one type of beak and they eat one type of food, versus these ones that are insect and nectar eaters. And so they all came from the same finch ancestry, but they've changed to fit a specific resource that works for them. And so that would be your divergence. That's it for now. Thanks. Bye.